The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this February 4th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Also, they play the show at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, Monday through Friday. And if you can't watch either of those, listen to either of those, go to my website at arcticbeacon.com, ARCTICBEACON.com. Let's get right at it today. The last few shows I've been running featuring the tragic story of journalist Gary Webb, as well as featuring an interview I did years ago with Tony Gambino, connecting the dots between the government, the mafia, and the Vatican. I'm going to go one step farther. What happens is people don't believe people like Tony Gambino because they say he is a crook, he's a mafia criminal, he'll say anything. But I said in these shows that I'd rather believe him than any of the people in the high-level papacy, any of the people in the high-level governments of the world, and any of the people in the CIA. So I talked about Gambino was talking about all this connection between the drug trade and the mafia and how the government and the Vatican benefit, as well as their collusion on 9/11 and many, many other things going way back. He was even talking about their collusion in World War II, moving into the Cold War, etc. I wanted to go just one step farther and bring on today, again, a man that I've had on my show many, many times, and I'm going to play a video he did, and you're going to get the audio. This is recent, and it's called Al-Qaeda, ISIS, CIA, and Papacy. Now, as we left off with Gary Webb, talking about the collusion between the CIA, our government, and bringing in all this heroin and crack cocaine and profiting from it. So, in that, back in the 80s and 90s, they used it for the war in Nicaragua. Now, this was going on in many, many other places in the country, or in the world. And I then said, let's fast forward to now. And let's see the connection between our government, the papacy, ISIS, and this war on terror. Now, I'm no stranger on this war on terror because I was almost killed when I was an editor for an American newspaper in Rome on May 26, 1982. Now, I've told you about that story. So it made me kind of research where this terrorism comes from, and I found a connection there in Rome during the 80s, that strategy of tension they were using, testing out, in a sense, using Italy as a test grounds, where American CIA assets were connecting with people like Licio Gelli to create these terrorist organizations. And one of their targets was, during a period of time, were certain American places in Rome, such as the newspaper, such as a coffee shop a lot of Americans hung out at, such as a bookstore, etc. And this came, the bomb in the American newspaper came 10 days before Reagan made his first visit to Rome. So I understand how this works, and it made me research it, and I know there's a connection, and Gary Webb was right, and here's the deal. When you're talking about this war on terror with ISIS, it's now a global war on terror, and I believe the same people have their hands in it, the money being funneled to ISIS through Western connections, just as they did it in World War II, just as they did it during the Cold War, just as we've documented here how A priest from Georgetown University named Edmund Walsh was the broker for a deal to get Stalin involved in the Bolshevik Revolution. And you know that Stalin became one of the biggest mass murderers in our history. And he was, basically, I call him Father Joseph Stalin, because if you check his background, he was trained at Tiflis, which was a Jesuit place of learning, and I believe that he took his vows there. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, let's fast forward to ISIS. Has anything changed since Gary Webb lost his life over this? Has anything changed? No, it's gotten worse. And so I'm going to call on Bill Hughes to kind of connect the dots. And he put out this video just recently called Al-Qaeda, ISIS, CIA, and the Papacy. Now, Bill Hughes was on my show many times regarding his small books but well-researched called The Enemy Within and The Secret Terrorists. Get a copy of those. They're online. He was passing out thousands of them free. Now, he was in the Seventh-day Adventist. Well, Bill, when I was interviewing him, he's no longer. He has talked about right now to present this. I played about 12 minutes yesterday. I'm going to pick it up today and go as far as we can, because he does a really good job in connecting these dots between the ISIS, CIA, and the Papacy. Let's call on Bill Hughes right now.
18 and verse 3 tells us, "For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." Okay, the kings, we already know about the kings, have committed fornication with her. Now there's a fourth entity that's mentioned. "And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." We now have four entities. We have the political powers of the earth, the kings. We have the apostate Protestant churches of the world. We have the world's wealthy, which are the merchants. And we have the papal power. We have an international conspiracy. It's not a theory, it's a fact. Now, folk, in our world today, if you believe in a conspiracy, like I've had so many people tell me, I'm a crazy, I'm an idiot, I'm a terrorist, I have no basis for it. Well, there is a basis for it. The only time when I think it's important to study about conspiracy is when it is understood in the light of the drive of the papal power to take over the world. Folk, you know, a lot of people will take other things that have no relationship to Babylon the Great and turn that into some huge conspiracy itself. I back away from that, because that's not our message. Our message is, in light of Revelation 17 and 18, in exposing Babylon the Great, we want to understand what is going on in our world in the context of Babylon the Great's drive to take over the world. Okay? So sometimes we can get sidetracked by what I would call, well, not riffraff, but side things that don't really connect it to the papal power. And I think, folk, if we do that, we're missing the boat when it comes to understanding these last few chapters in the book of Revelation. Now, in the last 70 years of Earth's history, of this world's history, the last 70 years, that would be from 2015, go back another 55, till about, say, 1940, 1945. I want us to look this afternoon at how in the last 70 years, how the great controversy has been playing out in our world in the light of nations and in the light of events that have taken place. That's what we're going to look at this afternoon. And you can see it in the title, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the CIA, and the Papacy. Do they connect? Now, I believe, folk, at the end of this meeting, we will all agree, yes, they definitely connect. No questions asked. But how do they connect? Well, let's go back, a little bit of history. I personally love history. I was going to be a history teacher before I became a Seventh-day Adventist. Of course, my understanding of history has greatly changed over the years. But notice, you've got the three great Allied powers. Right towards the end of World War II, you have Churchill that ran England or Great Britain. You have Franklin Roosevelt, who ran the capitalist West or America. And you have Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet, well, at that point it was Russia, but it was in the process of becoming the Soviet Union. And as World War II came to an end, it became obvious that Hitler was not going to win, and the Japanese were not going to win. It was very clear as the war went on that America and Russia would divide up the world. Now that became very obvious. Now, the problem was the capitalist West, FDR, the entire economic fabric of the West was completely different than the ideology of Russia and communism. Completely different. And so after World War II, what developed in our world? It was like we went from one war right into another one. And what did we call it? It was called a Cold War. And it was between Russia and the United States. Or was it? Or was it? You say, what are you talking about, or was it? We lived through that time. I was born in 57. I remember, in fact, one of my most vivid memories, in fact, it's about the only one I can remember back that far. When I was 4 years old, in 1961, I remember going out of my parents' kitchen into our garage. Right next to there was a shelf of canned goods. Typically, we had just a few on those shelves. I will never forget going out there one day, and my dad was just stockpiling cans completely on these shelves. And I said, Dad, what are you doing? Why do we have so many cans on the shelf? He said, well, son, there's a leader in Russia. His name is Khrushchev. And right now, Khrushchev is planning to bring atomic weaponry to Cuba. And our president, John Kennedy, is telling him, don't come and don't bring your stuff to Cuba. Because if you do, if you cross a certain point in the ocean, John F. Kennedy, our president, is telling the Russian leader, we're going to blow you out of the water. And so he said, Bill, there could be some very serious consequences between Russia and America. And he said, that's why I want to have a little bit of extra food at home. Well, let's think about what the Bible says about these two Cold War opponents. The Bible says that the kings of the earth, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. The woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Well, if Roosevelt and Stalin were kings of the earth after World War II, who controlled them? The Bible says they were controlled by the papacy. Now, a lot of Americans, if we asked that to them, you know what they'd say? They'd say, well, maybe the Russians were controlled because they were evil, but not America because we're great. And you know what? People in Russia, you know what they were told? They were told, well, maybe Americans were controlled because they're evil, but not the leaders in Russia. The Bible says the papacy controlled both Roosevelt and Stalin and had them fighting against one another in the Cold War. You say, that is ridiculous. I must have eaten too much and I didn't hear what you just said. The papacy controlled both of them and had them fighting against each other? That's exactly right. What happened after World War II with Russia? What did Russia start to do throughout the world? What did they do? Their name changed from Russia to what? The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Why did it become called the USSR? Because they started gobbling up countries right on their borders, like Latvia, Estonia, and all those other ones, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia. They gobbled those up. Why? They made those countries communist. And then what was the war that America got in the early 50s in Korea? You remember the Korean War? And we were told the reason why? Because the Russians were coming in to spread communism in Korea. So to combat that, America went to war. And then after that, it was Vietnam. And what was the issue? Same issue. The Russians were spreading communism all over the world. Now, America was raised up at that time. America was opposing the spread of communism. So the Catholics or the Jesuits in Russia were telling Stalin, and by the way, Joseph Stalin was born and raised and educated as a Roman Catholic. Okay? The Jesuits that led Joseph Stalin in Russia said, spread communism throughout the world. In the United States, FDR was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and the CFR was a front organization of the Jesuit order. So the Jesuits that controlled Roosevelt in America said, stop the spread of communism wherever you can. Now you say, that is dumb. Is it? Is that dumb? I want you to think for a minute. I don't know if it's this slide. There it is. There it is. Anybody ever heard of the book, The Keys of This Blood? You've heard of that? You've read it? Okay. Now, written by a Jesuit, Malachi Martin. Malachi Martin said there were how many groups that were vying for world control? How many groups were there? 3 groups. Who were the 3? The United States, Russia, and the papacy. That's right, Sandy. And in the process of killing off 2 of those superpowers, in the process, the world begins to paint a picture of the two powers that are fighting each other. Now, what has been the impression? What does the world think of the United States in our drive to stop the spread of communism throughout the world? What is the rest of the world? What do they call us? The great what? The great Satan. You remember Ayatollah Khomeini? He said Americans are the great Satan, the wounded snake. You know why he called them that? You know why the world looks at America like that? Because America goes into countries around this world and says, we're going to give you the kind of government that we want you to have. That's why the Middle Eastern folk, they despise America. Why? Because we put our nose into their business and they don't want it there. How about Russia? Do you remember in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was in office? What did he call the Soviet Union? He called them the evil empire. Why? Because they're spreading communism all around the world. So, folk, indeed, the Jesuits wanted to give the Russians a black eye, which they have. They're known as the evil empire. The Jesuits in America wanted America to have a black eye. We've been given one. We're the great Satan. So in the scenario that Malachi Martin painted, of those three powers jockeying for world control, which of the three comes out smelling like a rose? The papacy. The papacy. It's exactly right. The papacy. So Russia goes everywhere spreading communism. Eastern Europe becomes communist. Southeast Asia, Africa, as far away as Cuba and Central and South America, becoming communist. All over the world this thing is spreading. How would America stop it? What group was raised up in America to stop the spread of communism? Does anybody know? This is another one of those, it's one of those questions. Who was raised up to stop the spread of communism? It's called the CIA. Now, once we look at a few more slides, you will immediately understand that the CIA is not the Central Intelligence Agency. It's not that. It's actually the Catholic Intelligence Agency. Okay? Let me show you. About mid-World War II, there was a secret organization started in America. It was called the OSS, which meant the Office of Strategic Services. Well, that eventually spawned or blossomed into a new organization called the CIA. Now, the man who started the OSS in America was this man right here. His name was Wild Bill Donovan.
Okay, I'm going to break it there because we're going to take a break in about 20 seconds. But we'll come back with Bill Hughes, author of The Enemy Within, The Secret Terrorists, on the Investigative Journal. And I hope you're getting the picture here. He's going back a little ways. On this show, we've gone way, way back. And I've talked to Bill many times. And the dots do connect. And I hope that you pay close attention to what he's saying right now. And we'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The rapture will be canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, and let's get right back to Bill Hughes and his presentation entitled Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the CIA, which he calls the Catholic Intelligence Agency, and the Papacy.
Bill Donovan was a devout Roman Catholic. He was a Knight of Malta, meaning whoever is a Knight of Malta is somebody who has made an oath that they will do whatever the Roman Catholic Church tells them to do. They're utterly a slave of Romanism. That's a Knight of Malta. Well, Bill Donovan was just that. And the goal of the CIA, well, let me read it to you. This is taken from a book. Got to show it to you. It's called Operation Gladio. Written by a devout Roman Catholic Paul L. Williams. Operation Gladio, it's called the Unholy Alliance between the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia. Paul Williams, on page 47 of this book, says this: in 1945, the Pope had held private audiences with Wild Bill Donovan. The Pope, Pope Pius XII, held a private meeting with this man. For what reason? To discuss the implementation of Gladio, the training of men in countries around the world, and had decorated him as a crusader against what? Communism. With the Grand Cross of the Order of St. Sylvester, the oldest and most prestigious of papal knighthoods. So Bill Donovan was decorated with the Grand Cross as a crusader to fight against communism. And that's what his organization was all about, was to stop the spread of communism. Now, Bill Donovan started recruiting men, Alan Dulles, James Angleton, Paul Helliwell, and other leaders in the American government or in the American industrial community. And they needed men to start working in this new organization, the OSS, eventually the CIA. Well, where would these men go to get men to work in their new organization? Well, they went to Fordham University, which is a preeminent Jesuit university in New York. They went to Holy Cross. They went to Boston College. They went to a number of Roman Catholic universities in the northeastern part of this country, and they recruited men to become members of their now secret CIA organization. Folk, from the get-go, the CIA has been a Catholic-dominated organization, and their primary purpose has been the destruction of communism throughout the world. So it's not the Central Intelligence Agency, it's the Catholic Intelligence Agency. Now, what are these Gladio? What's this Operation Gladio? What's that mean? Well, Gladio comes from the Roman word of gladiator. A gladiator was somebody who fought on behalf of the Roman Empire. Well, Operation Gladio, as Paul Williams describes it, was in every country throughout the world, wherever there was a threat of communist invasion, the CIA would train Germans in Germany, Italians in Italy, Koreans in Korea, Vietnamese in Vietnam. The CIA would train them and would fund them with weaponry and with housing and food, and they would train these natives of those countries to fight against communism. And that's what these gladiator or gladio units were all about. But where? Think about how much money that would cost. I mean, to fight a Soviet invasion, we're talking about, we'll say 100,000 troops, Russian troops come into a country. Well, how much money would it take to finance an army to stop 100,000 troops coming into your country. How much, Frank? $1 million a day? So 30 million in 1 month? $360 million in a year? Where do you get money like that? But where would they get it? I mean, they're fighting pedophile suits in country in America, and where do you get that kind of money? How do you find money to train men and women throughout the world? Money to feed, house, arm armies throughout the world with modern weapons. You get it? Well, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to find the money. But then there was a man, his name was Chiang Kai-shek. Have anybody ever heard of him? You have, Sandy? Audrey? Okay. Chiang Kai-shek was the leader of the Nationalist Party in China. Chiang Kai-shek was opposed to Mao Zedong, who brought communism into China and made China Red China. Okay, that's why they call it Red China, because of Mao Zedong. Well, Chiang Kai-shek was fighting Mao Zedong in China, and the way that Chiang Kai-shek was able to finance his armies and to pay his men was he made deals with drug lords in Burma, in Thailand, and in Vietnam. He said, if you will give me your drugs, then I will pay you back with commodities I have. So they would give Chiang Kai-shek, they would sell their drugs, their poppies, their heroin. They'd sell it to Chiang Kai-shek. He would then, in turn, sell it to people in China. And he made millions of dollars. Chiang Kai-shek did. He was able to finance his war against Mao Zedong with drug money. That's how he did it. Well, Bill Donovan in the CIA, the Catholic Intelligence Agency, Alan Dulles, Paul Helliwell, James Angleton, they saw what Chiang Kai-shek was doing. So they went to the drug lords of Southeast Asia and they said, look it, what do you want? We'll give you weapons. We'll give you money, but we want your drugs. So the drug lords of Southeast Asia said, that's fine, we'll sell them to you. They took the drugs, they came over to the streets of New York, Chicago, Houston, Miami, Los Angeles. They started selling drugs throughout America in the big cities, especially in the ghettos. Especially in the ghettos of big U.S. cities. They would grow the poppy plants in Southeast Asia, manufacture it to heroin, sell it to the Catholic Intelligence Agency. It would be sold in U.S. cities. That was how the CIA would finance their projects of war. That's how they did it, folks. That's how they did it. Right here, this is the primary region. It was the Shan Plateau in Burma. It became the heroin-growing capital of the world. Billions and billions of dollars of heroin flowed from that region to the ghettos of the big cities of America. And the Catholic Intelligence Agency was fighting communism around the world. That's how they did it, folks. You know, it's an interesting fact that Paul Williams brings out in his book, Operation Gladio, that from 1947 to 1967, There went from like 10,000 drug addicts in the United States, that by the late 60s there was over 100,000 drug addicts in America. And I would dare say that there is probably not a family represented in this room that was not somehow affected by the Catholic Intelligence Agency selling drugs in America. I know my family was. I had a brother that lost his mind on drugs. And those drugs were provided by the Catholic Intelligence Agency on U.S. soil. Well, now let's think about something else. So they're getting this drug money and it's flowing. They're getting billions and billions of dollars of drug money. Where do you deposit it? Which bank is going to accept it? That's dirty. It's dirty money. I know, I'll give you an example. When I was in Australia, somebody had just sold a business or a property or something, and the man had like $10,000 of tithe. And he came to me, he'd been coming, I'd been there like 5 years. He came to me and he said, Bill, I have never helped you. And the meetings I come to every year, I'm so blessed. He said, God has blessed me. Here's some tithe money. Folk, I got to the airport in Brisbane. On the immigration form, it says, do you have $10,000 or more of Australian currency? I thought, well, let me see now. What are my options? I could lie, but that's not right. It's not right. I thought, I'm going to check this box because I don't have anything to hide. I checked it. I did. I had 10,000 and I had some more that others had given to me. Went through customs. Folk, when the custom agent saw that, the bells, it was like New Year's. They were on me like I was honey and they were bees. You know, it was, where did you get that money? I said, sir, somebody sold a property. I'm a minister. Somebody sold a property and gave me this as a donation of tithe money. Where were these meetings held? You know, do you have your credentials? Let me see that you're a minister. Folk, I was a criminal. I was a criminal because I was honest. Because I had honestly reported on that document what was true. I was a criminal. I felt like a criminal. Well, finally, after they interrogated me, they let me through and there was no problem. My point is, how do you go into a Bank of America, SunTrust, wherever you bank, and say, and open up a briefcase and say, here's $100,000 of bills, $100 bills, $100,000. I'd like to deposit it in my account. Folk, you would have every bell in that bank going off. You'd have every police officer in your town showing up outside. They wouldn't know what to do. They would interrogate you no end. But folks, we're not talking about $100,000 in one suitcase. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. What, monthly? Are you kidding me? They'd have us in jail in a heartbeat. So what do you do? How many banks in the world will launder dirty money? How many are there? At that time, when this was going on back in the 50s and 60s, there was one bank in the world that accepted that dirty money. But it was on one condition. The condition was that for every dollar that came through, they got 15%. 15%. Now, watch this. Paul Williams' book, Operation Gladio, he says this, page 45. The money had to be channeled through a financial firm that would not be subjected to scrutiny by U.S. Treasury agents. Makes perfect sense. Or international fiscal monitors. Only one such institution possessed such immunity, and it was located in the heart of Vatican City. The bank today remains a sovereign financial agency within a sovereign state. You can't touch it. You can't, nobody can touch the Vatican Bank. It's a sovereign bank in a sovereign country. Can't touch it.
How big is it, Bill? I mean, again, you're talking billions and billions of dollars. How big are the vaults? I mean, it can only help me out here.
What is your name?
Mike.
Mike, you were over there.
Yeah, well, it's easier to see.
Yeah, and you didn't have my glasses. This isn't easy, Mike. Come on. Mike, what they did was, Mike, money comes through there immediately. Okay, number one, there's no paper trail. There's no receipting. Immediately, Mike, it comes through the Vatican, and it's gone. It's gone. Swiss bank accounts, Zurich, Geneva, Bern, the money's in those Swiss bank accounts. And see, legally, now it's clean. See, it went through the Vatican washing machine, and it came out, and it's all clean. It's all clean. See? It cannot be compelled to redress wrongs, not even the worst violations of international law. It cannot be forced to release the source of any deposit. The bank resides under the jurisdiction of the Pope. He owns it. He controls it. And by the way, Paul Williams in his book says that while there are other banks today that will launder dirty money, the Vatican Bank still remains one of the largest dirty money laundering operations in the world. And the Pope owns it and controls it. So all that stuff that we were hearing in the press over the last couple of weeks about this humble, loving man who loves the poor, did you hear that about Pope Francis? Folk, that is just an absolute lie. It's an absolute lie. What's that? Oh, he does, Gail. Oh, yes, he does. Now, there's always been a verse that's puzzled me, but after reading this book, it doesn't puzzle me anymore. Revelation 18:23. Notice, the Bible says, the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Do you know the Greek translation of the word sorceries? Pharmakia, from which we get our English word of pharmacy. So the Bible directly connects the drug world, thank you, Sandy. The Bible connects the drug world with the international bankers and Babylon the Great. Now there you have it, folks, right there. And this, in principle, is what Paul Williams has laid out in detail as to exactly how the drug empires of the world are connected to and controlled by Babylon the Great. Again, Williams, page 46 of his book, he says, because of its clandestine workings, millions can be deposited into the Vatican Bank on a continuous basis, channeled into Swiss bank accounts without the possibility of detection. Disappears. It was the perfect place for the CIA and the Sicilian Mafia to launder their ill-gotten gains of the narcotics trade and for the Roman Church to fund their political mission. According to MoneyVal, the Anti-Money Laundering Committee of the Council of Europe, it remains one of the world's leading laundries for dirty cash under Pope Francis. Now you say, but wait a minute, Bill. You connected Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the CIA and the Papacy, but you haven't said a word about Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Well, I'm glad you asked that.
Okay, and I'm going to cut that off. And that'll bring you back tomorrow, I hope, because Bill Hughes has a very good presentation on this subject. You know in past shows that I have as well, and have connected the dots between ISIS and the papacy through many things, notwithstanding the name itself, connecting it to the papacy, to our Washington Monument, and you have to go back to shows to see the occult significance of this name in itself. But let's get back tomorrow and finish this up. We got about another 40 minutes that I want to play for you, so we'll do that on Friday. And remember, go to my website at arcticbeacon.com. That's arcticbeacon.com. And you can get a lot of my shows going back a long time. This has been a long-running show, the Investigative Journal. It's been labeled the alternative to the alternative media for good reason. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.